Yo, what's up guys? I'm going to talk to you today about hip-hop, jazz, chord progressions, and stylings. How you can go about taking your guitar knowledge and turning it into another genre that you may not have considered. I actually got some inspiration from this really awesome keyboard player on YouTube called Jeff Schneider. I thought the electric piano type stuff would translate really well to a guitar, which I think it has. So I'm going to show you what I have learned about hip-hop guitar, and it's really kind of like neo-soul, R&B, a melting pot of genres that I think are really, really smooth and can add a new dynamic to your guitar playing that you may not have tried before. So I'm going to talk about 5 different elements that makes up this style of guitar playing. I'm sure there's more, but these are the ones that you can implement right away. There is going to be a lot of music theory in this, so if you've never kind of delved into intervals or voicings of these types, then check out my course, Guitar Super System, linked down below, and it'll fill in the gaps for you if there are any. So let's get started with the first element of hip-hop jazz guitar, which is, of course, jazzy voicings. So the chord progression that I'm going to be using is the one that I started this video off with. It doesn't necessarily subscribe to a certain key, but the voicings you can be sure are definitely jazzy. So for your reference, a major 9 chord is the one we're going to be really harping on in this first section, and it is spelled like this: C, E, B, D. So there's the 9. And this is the major 3rd, and this is the major 7th. So the bass line goes C, B, E flat, D flat. Doesn't really sound great, does it? But when you add in those major 9 voicings, it sounds really nice. Now, of course, that's too jazzy. We want some hip-hop elements, which is usually pertaining to rhythm. Hip-hop is all about rhythm. A lot of stuff's all about rhythm, but hip-hop especially. So the rhythm we're going to go with is following the little bass drum groove that I dialed in, something like this. So that is the first element, jazzy sounding chords. And you know, we're gonna get into even more jazz stuff in the next section. So that's coming, but for now, major 9 chords only, and that will lead us into our next element of hip-hop jazz guitar, which is these nuances, these little slides and kind of grace notes that make it that real kind of like falling behind the beat, really chilled vibe. So this major 9, I'm going to take the major 7 note and slide up to it, or really it's a grace note from the major 6. So we have this chord, C major 9, and then we use the major 6 and hammer on the major 7. So up close and personal, we have something like this. And we're going to do that for all the chords in that progression that I mentioned earlier. So we went from this boring to this. Really nice. And you could hear I do a couple anticipations, like muted ghost notes, to get into some of these chords. So it's that anticipation. Here would be the downbeat, but I'm gonna go on this bass note. And it's not every time, it's just thrown in once in a while to add a little bit of spice to the progression. That'll lead us into the third element of hip-hop jazz guitar, which is the feel. That anticipated feel is generally, I'm falling behind the beat. So with a drum beat, you can either be right on the beat, you can be behind the beat, or you can be ahead of the beat. That will dictate what kind of feel it is. So with hip-hop, I kind of feel like a laid-back kind of relaxed feel, and that anticipation is kind of pulling you backwards as opposed to if you were just straight ahead on the beat. It's kind of neutral. So that feel can be accomplished, like I said, using the anticipation notes, the ghost notes on that bass string before you play the actual chord. You can do it another way by drawing out these rhythms. So as you could hear, I was just going, but what I could do is something like this. You hear how much that changes the progression? If I have that pause with the chord happening, especially with the drums, it can really be effective. In addition to that, the fourth element of hip-hop jazz guitar would be fills in between these chords. So I'm really just drawing a couple notes out of these. So, you know, from these chords, it's not necessarily in a particular scale. So when you have a chord progression where it's just random chords plucked out of nowhere, not necessarily pertaining to a certain scale, a great thing to do is choose a pentatonic scale, because first of all, the pentatonic scale is only 5 notes, so you have less notes that are possibly going to clash with whatever intervals are inside the voicing. And also, the pentatonic scale pretty much always sounds good. So in this progression, C major 9, B major 9, I'll take the B major pentatonic scale and use it to set up the next chord. So right here, I have that accessible to me, so I can create a little fill just using some major pentatonic notes from the chord that I'm using currently. So with all those elements put together, we could have something like this. So we have something like that, or like I said, we could change where we draw out the chord, and we can also try a different little fill to affect the feel of the overall progression. So the final element of hip-hop jazz guitar that I'm going to get into today is having some type of rhythmic differentiation in a bridge form, something to basically break up the groove so you're not just repeating the same thing over again. I know traditional hip-hop, there's songs that literally just loop the same beat over and over, but that's with a, somebody who's rapping over top who's making it interesting. But if we're talking about just guitar, I want to make sure that I don't bore the listener to sleep, right? So we've already got our A section, right? Now, where do we go from here? So since I didn't really have a home base in this chord progression, it's up to me where I want to take the tonality. So if I'm thinking of this whole thing in the key of B major, I can craft a super jazzy, going back to that first element, having jazzy chord shapes and chord voicings. I'm going to think of this in the key of B major. And I'm going to come up here to this G, and this is a G minor 11. Technically, this is going to be my 2 chord. And again, do not worry about any of this theory if you've never learned theory before. This is getting a little advanced, but I just wanted to explain myself for those of you who may be wondering. Again, check out Guitar Super System. Link down below if you are interested in learning about these intervallic relationships, but I'm going to kind of speed through it right now. So we have this G minor 11, which is acting as a substitution for the 2 chord of B major. And it's a tritone substitution. Technically, after this, we're going to go up to an F sharp 13 chord. And then after that, we're going to take a B6 9. So this progression in itself, that is what's called a 2-5-1. Maybe you've heard of that before, but simplifying it, in the key of B, we have the 2 chord, which would be C sharp. Again, we're substituting with a G minor chord. And then, so that would be the 2, and then the 5 would be an F sharp. and then back to B major. So one more time, the simple version, and then the fancy version. Pretty cool. So that is where I got these chords from. I'm not just pulling them out of nowhere. But like I said, this rhythmic device that has to happen here to differentiate from the A section groove is going to be the way to be most effective in delivering this hip hop jazz style guitar playing. So we had some really groovy thing happening here in the beginning. Let's take the opposite approach and just have quarter notes. So I'm ending on minor 9 at 11, a very nice resolution in the key of B major. And again, theory out the yin yang on this lesson, but really it comes down to the 5 elements, which is having some fancy jazz voicings, which you can find anywhere online. Just look up cool jazz guitar voicings, or go to one of my YouTube videos called Expensive Guitar Chords, or check out Guitar Super System, link down in the description. But basically, jazzy voicings, grace notes, feel, and fills, and finally, rhythmic variations will all yield a really, really cool hip-hop jazz guitar part. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I'm going to play through all the elements again using the chord progression we've come up with. Check out Jeff Schneider. He's an amazing keyboard player here on YouTube. That's where I got the inspiration for this lesson. And I will see you all next time. Until then, keep shredding.